Hello everybody, this is Andrew, also known as NatureMan. Today's video is about Norway Spruce, Picea aves, Norway Spruce. Originally, what was in these spots were Austrian pines. They were planted 15 years ago. Small, like little 5 to 6 foot trees, very tiny, about the same size as these Norway spruces now. They reached a height, maybe 30 or 40 feet. They were getting diseased. They're about the size of those back there from the other side, which were not cut down. See, the lighting's not too well, but you can get the gist. So they were diseased, so I do not recommend planting Austrian pine in North America, the United States and Canada. Now out in Europe, there might not be as many diseases, so in its native habitat, it would be fine to plant either in natural restoration or simply landscaping. But in the United States and Canada, not a good idea. The same thing goes with Scotch pine. They are prone to diseases. Now when they're young, maybe for the first several years, they'll be perfectly fine. But as they age and get to a certain height, and it'll be more prone to disease. Just like any plant, like even a Colorado blue spruce, it gets needle cast that can kill the tree, at least in my area. When it's young, the branches are so thin that they simply cannot get the disease. But as it gets older and the branches thicken and get wider, it is more prone to a disease. Same thing goes with almost any tree. Same thing with an ash tree, with the emerald ash borer. It won't get it until it's older. The same thing with the American chestnut. It won't get it until it reaches a certain age. Norway spruce, though, on the other hand, has very little pest problems. Most spruce trees have major pests, and which is why more people don't plant spruce trees, But Norway spruce are one of those few trees that have very little pests and problems, and are simply one of the best spruce trees for landscaping, and are adapted to a wide range of conditions. They can grow in anywhere from wet soil to dry, rocky, arid conditions. In fact, they will grow faster if you place them in areas that have an excess of 75 inches of rainfall a year. And most spruce trees grow in the mountains where they get less than 25. That's not including snowfall. So it's amazing. Now, they don't like to stand in water. They won't grow. They will rot. They like to thoroughly dry out in between waterings, but they love a lot of moisture. They just don't like to sit in the moisture. So don't get confused when I say, they like the moisture, so they'll grow in a swamp. That could not be further from the truth. Sorry, my camera got a little adjusted. So yeah, they, just like all of the spruce and pine, they need to thoroughly dry out. That's why they're still adaptable to wet soils, but it has to dry out. So you cannot grow it in a swamp or soils that are consistently moist. They will rot and die. But you can grow them out in the mountains where it's really dry, but they will also grow in very wet areas. As long as the soil is well drained, even a clay soil, as long as it's not too compacted, it's broken up, so it can still drain. I'm going to give you a close-up here, so as you can tell, and then they put down some grass seed. Yeah. And I wish they would have gone with, bigger trees. I have nothing against Norway spruce. In fact, it's probably the best option, better than planting a blue spruce or another pine that could be diseased and that'll die. Norway spruce, like I said, is one of the few spruces, and it's one of the only spruces in the world that are so adaptive to a wide range of conditions. It's almost unheard of in the spruce species that usually grow in very dry, rocky, arid conditions and are not as adaptable to more wet and clay soils, unlike the Norway spruce, which is. But you can grow it if you're out in Colorado, usually in elevations lower than 10,000 feet. You can grow this plant. It's hardy to USDA zone 2 through 8, meaning you can grow to temperatures that dip as low as 50 below zero. Yes, minus 50 degrees, and this is in Fahrenheit. I live in the United States, so I do not do Celsius. We do Fahrenheit. Minus 50 Fahrenheit, and the minimum. So here's the way to put it. For the warmest, coldest temperature it needs is about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have winters that do not get colder than 10 degrees Fahrenheit each and every year, you are not able to grow Norway spruce. So like you live in Georgia or Florida, or in an area that simply does not get to at least 10 degrees Fahrenheit several times each and every winter, then your climate is too warm for Norway spruce. So you can grow them from basically Tennessee points north, maybe New Jersey points north. So like I said, very adaptable, and it does not mind the hot summers, as it is very drought tolerant. So it does not mind the hot summers. It can grow in 100-degree heat, as long as it still gets some good adequate rainfall and the soil is, you know, completely dry, or at least it gets some good moisture. In drier soils, it will have significantly slower growth rate, but should not affect its health, unless if it's really bad. But as long as it's being well cared for. These trees are about 6 foot. They're probably marked as 6 to 7 footers. Give you a close up here. It doesn't get blurry on me. Out of focus. They have usually very green needles. Unlike a pine, they're not in clusters. That's one thing to note in a spruce. They are very sharp. Not too sharp though, because there are some, you know, conifers that are extremely sharp and it'll pierce your. But this isn't piercing sharp, but it is sharp. It's not soft, but it's not piercing sharp. So that's one thing to remember. It can poke you a little bit. Don't get me wrong, it will. They do make. A lot of people use them for Christmas trees. The only downside is that they have horrible needle retention. So if you have a cut tree and have it in water, it might only hold its needles for less than 2 weeks, maybe a week, week and a half, and it'll start dropping needles. If you are going to use Norway spruce as a Christmas tree, you are going to want to have it as a potted tree and then plant it in your yard after the holidays. You do not want to use it as a cut tree unless if you're going to use it, you know, a couple days before Christmas. Because a lot of people, like my family, I get a Christmas tree the week of Thanksgiving, and we keep it for a month, and we have a cut tree. We usually get like a Fraser fir, Scotch pine, etc. And those, they have great needle retention, and as long as it's kept in water, and the water's constantly refilled every day, I mean, it'll hold its needles for well over a month. But Norway spruce has less than 2 weeks of needle retention, and it'll start dropping, and then it's a fire hazard, and it's just a disaster waiting to happen. So now, if you do want to use it as a cut tree, you can. It's not soft needles like the Fraser fir, but if you are going to use it as a cut tree, I would say no later than a week before Christmas. Like, don't do it 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas. Don't do it first week of December. I mean, do it like December 20th, you know, if you are going to do that. Or if you want to get it earlier, but you are dying for a Norway spruce, you might want to get a potted tree. So there are a lot of nurseries and businesses that will sell you like potted arborvitae, spruce, pine, and you can use it as a Christmas tree and then plant it in your yard. I know there are lots of people who do that every year and have their yard full of Christmas trees from years past. Yeah. So Norway spruce, it's fairly fast growing in, like I said, in ideal conditions. It'll grow as much as 2 to 3 feet a year. I mean, that's in excess of 36, 48 inches a year, if not more. And but in more poor conditions, maybe where it's too wet or too dry, it might grow maybe a foot a year, which is not uncommon and does not necessarily mean the tree will die or it'll be less healthy. It just is in less ideal conditions, you might expect 1 to 2 feet a year. In more ideal conditions, 2 to 3 feet a year. And they do mature, since they're very fast growing trees, they do mature to about 80 to 100 feet tall. I mean, I've seen specimens over 100 feet tall and less than a century old. So, I mean, we're talking trees maybe 70, 80 years old that are over 100 feet that have a width of 40 feet. So they're very large. I have a friend in towards downtown Indianapolis, and the house and the trees were planted back in the early 1930s. And I mean, these trees are massive. I mean, they have to be 80 or 90 feet tall. They look like they've been there for 300 years, but they were only planted back in the 1930s. Now, that might seem like a long time ago, but for a tree to get that large in that time it means it's a fast-growing tree. A slower tree might take twice as long to reach that size. So it's impressive. So you can say within, let's say you have a 6-foot tree, like this one right here, in 20 years from now. So it's 2018. So so by 2038, this tree will, if you say, it grows 2 to 3 feet a year, I mean, it'll be over 40 feet tall, 40 or 50 feet tall. So, and then you could say, within 50 years, this tree will be probably nearing 100 feet. So it's a fast-growing tree, and you don't have to wait, 30 or 40 years for it to have any privacy. If you start with something small, I mean, you can have less than a decade, and you can have a good screen from a 6-foot tree. So you can have a tree that's over 15 feet tall in, maybe 5 or 6 years. So from a 6-foot tree. So you'll get good screening. You might have to wait a few years, but not like 30 years, you know. You might wait 6 or 7, not 30. So it's not the fastest growing tree, but it is very, very fast. It just can yield a wide range. And then you see they put down the straw, because that's because they put on grass seed, then the straw, and the straw kind of holds it in place so it doesn't wash away. It's almost November. Likely not going to germinate this summer. It might germinate next spring. So the reason why they only planted 3 and not, you know, like a row of 10 or something is because since they're so fast growing that if they plant them any closer or more in a clump, they're just going to intergrow with each other and become a mess, like in another 10 or 20 years. So that's why there's space, and there are only 3 of them, because this will fill in and make a nice fence. Like let's say you go 30, 40 feet wide by 80 feet tall. I mean, just the 3 trees alone will make a nice fence. And I can guarantee you within probably 20 years from now, these 2 trees will be touching each other. Or within less than 20 years, these 2 trees will be touching. And will be probably in excess of 30 or 40 feet tall. So it might be several years, but most likely, if some of you are not elderly, within your lifetime, a tree this size could make a very good screen in excess of 30, 40 feet tall and very wide. So that's just a little description and growing of Norway spruce, Picea abies. I'm going to go down here and show you more. These were all Austrian pines. They're all on the back side of my neighborhood. The homeowners association paid a lot of money to have them cut down and replaced. So I'm very thankful they did, because they were diseased. Half of them were dead. This is NatureMan signing off. Bye.